This is everything you need to know to start using splines in Cinema 4D. Okay, primitive splines are right here. You can click and add whatever you want from this menu. Different splines have different property in them. You can play with its property to get result that you like. There is also text spline here. You can change the text from here. There are also other properties that you can play around and get results you want. To start applying changes on a spline after adding it and playing with its parameter, you need to make it editable. Right click on it on Object Manager, make editable, and the icon changes like this. Or just hit C after selecting the spline, and the icon changes like this. Now you can start changing the points on the spline by coming to point mode or line mode. I select point mode here, click on one of the points on the spline, and start changing it. You can also do this with other splines, like text spline even. Hit C, come to point mode, and start to changing the points. You can also select different points and bulk edit on them. There are different splines tools in the Cinema 4D. You can find them from here. Spline, click on it, click top right here. Then you have different tools here. I just explained the most useful one here. A spline pen, I come to front view, allow you to draw a spline by clicking or hold left click to make a curve spline. You can also close the spline at the end. A sketch is just like a spline pen, give you the flexibility to just hold left click and draw a spline as you like. What is a spline smooth? After something like a spline that you make with a sketch spline tool, you need to make it smoother with less points on it. You come to point mode, selecting a spline, come to a spline spoon and start dragging on the edges. As you can see, it is much more smooth now with less points on it. There are different parameters for each tool that I'm explaining in the attribute panel. Magnet. Just like a magnet, you can pull or push the points to get a result that you want. There are different settings here for the mode, strength, and radius, and other things that you can play around with. The other thing is hard or soft interpolation. Just like Illustrator and other vector-based software, you can make the points to have handles or removing their handles for hard interpolation. I, for example, select this point. It is a soft interpolation. I click on the hard interpolation, and as you can see, it makes it hard with no curved edges. Hard, or I just click on this soft interpolation, and I can grab these handles, adjust it as I want. You can also access these options from right click on it and select soft tangent or hard tangent. If you want to add points on a spline to adjust it furthermore, you have two main tools here. Line cut, which you can click on a screen and add points as much as you want. As you can see, points added on the spline. Or from this chamfer, you can hold left click and click on create point and click on the spline to add point on it. But if you draw your spline and now you decided to close it, I mean connecting the start and end point together, you can simply select your spline, come to point mode, select something like a spline pen, click on one edge, and when you hover over another edge, you can see the icon changes for the mouse and click on it. Now your spline is closed. But if you want to connect two or more pieces of splines together, if they are on the same spline object, as you can see in the object manager, you can simply come to point mode, select something like a spline pen, click on one edge, and click another one. Now they are one single connected spline. But if you want to make your splines that you're drawing on separate object, after drawing each one, you enter escape key and start drawing another one. But as you can see, they are on the same object in the object manager. But if you want them as separate objects, which make it easier for you to move them in the model mode freely, not dependent on each other. After drawing your first spline, click on the object manager and an empty space, select the spline pen again, and start drawing your second spline. As you can see now, there are two separate splines that I can move them in the model mode freely without affecting each other. But if you want to connect your separate splines together as a single object or single spline, not two separate ones, select all the splines you want from object manager, right click and select connect object plus delete. As you can see now, they are on the one spline object. I can come back to point mode, select something like a spline pen, click on one point and click on another point. Now there are one connected splines. There are lots of other tools in the spline panel for a splines tool, but these that I explained to you are the most common and useful ones. We will explain each of these tools in the future in other videos. Now you know spline objects, spline text, and the most useful spline tools here. The last thing you need to know about using a spline is spline generators. They are right here. Hold left click on this green icon, click on this to keep it open. The most common generators for a spline are these: extrude, lathe, loft, sweep, and a spline mask. Let's explain each one separately. We'll start with the extrude. Extrude is the most simple one. Think as if you added your spline or you can draw your spline from here. There's no difference. I added a primitive spline. Come to object path, make its plane XZ, and you want your spline to have depth on it. Make it an 3D object, not a simple line or spline in 3D. You add the extrude object, click and drag your spline in object manager under the extrude. As you can see now, my spline is real 3D geometry, and I have options to change an extrude attribute like offset and other stuff. To see the subdivisions, come to display, select something like hidden lines, and I can change the subdivision, and as you can see, they changes here. Look here. Or I can select it to have a start or end cap, or I don't want them. There are lots of other options that you can play around with. Okay, next spline generator is sweep. For sweep, you need two splines. I added, for example, an arc spline. I grabbed the both splines and dragged them under sweep as a child. Let's first change the order of these two. Make the cogwheel first. Change the plane for cogwheel to XY, and also make the cogwheel smaller with the scale tool. As you can see, it is very similar to extrude, but it extruded along the arc spline. As you can see, when I change arc spline parameters, the cogwheel spline extrusion direction changes. You can also use any other splines for it. For example, this time let's add an start as first object and draw the second spline with a spline pen. I come to front view, draw a spline here, come back to model mode, add this spline as the second child. And as you can see, the start spline is extruded along the second spline. I can change the size of a star with a scale tool, and you can see the changes here. Next generator we want to explain is loft. It needs two or more than two splines. For example, I add a circle here, another rectangle here. Let's first make them offset from the center and add both of this spline as a child of loft generator. As you can see, it is very similar to extrude and sweep, but the main point here is that you can morph between different splines while making a geometry. For example, I can add another spline. This time let's add a star, offset it here, and add it above rectangle under loft. And as you can see, these three splines are transforming to each other in extrude fashion. I can change, rotate, and apply changes to any of these splines. Let's get back to ground shading and see what happened. Let's get back to quick shading lines and see the geometry on the surface. Next spline generator is lathe. Lathe can be mostly used for something like clay dishes. Let's make one of these here. Come to front view and let's select a spline sketch tool and draw something like this. So let's make it smoother with the spline smooth. Okay. And now let's add the spline under lathe. As you can see, we have something like a clay dish here. Come back to a spline, select point mode, come back to a spline tool, select magnet, and drag and apply changes to the spline to make the final geometry different. The last generator we want to discuss is a spline mask. It is very similar to bool operator for geometries. As in bool generator, you can subtract or union the objects together to make a new unified object. In the spline mask, you can do the same with the splines. For example, let's add a circle spline and let's add a rectangular spline. Make the rectangle smaller, move it to the side with this handle, and add both of them under a spline mask. As you can see, a spline mask attribute in the object tab mode is union. It added two splines together. I can move the spline and it updates real time. Or I can select other modes in the spline mask in attribute panel object tab. I can, for example, select A subtract B or B subtract A and still apply changes to the object and it updates in real time. You can use generators in combination to each other. For example, after a spline mask, I want to extrude this shape. I can add extrude generator, add the spline mask under extrude. And what is great about using generator is that they are non-destructive, which means I can change the splines. I can change the splines parameters even after adding generators at top of them. Can even change something like extrude offset or come to spline mask and change the mode from A subtract B to union. One caveat here is that for the best result for a spline mask, you need the splines on the same plane. As you can see here, the rectangle is offsetted to the positive z-axis a little bit and circle is not. So I grab this rectangle, come here, enable a snapping tool, click on the gear icon and select something like a grid work plane here. And I snap them both on the same plane. As you can see, if I drag the rectangle and offset it from the plane of the circle, there is something like a bug here. So make sure to always keep the splines on the same plane. And that's all for this video. This is all thing you need to know to start working on the splines. We will discuss more tools and explain each of the generator more in depth in the future videos. Bye bye for now.